The force the vote debate over whether or not progressives in Congress should demand anything at all in exchange for supporting Nancy Pelosi for Speaker continues to rage on. One of the latest entrants into the debate was a kind of a strange piece from Yasha Levine over on Substack. Now, Yasha actually admits that he agrees with the idea of forcing the squad to do something, as he writes. What's the point of seeking congressional power if you're not going to use it to make a scene, gum up the works, and show up your enemies? Pretty well said. Now, his problem isn't with the idea itself, but rather with the left media ecosystem that supports this idea. He writes, quote, "The Bernie revolution was a dud and disappeared right in front of our very eyes, while spawning a new prog-left media ecosystem that is very profitable for a few key influencers. Listening to their streams and podcasts with their entrepreneurial hosts and pundits and panels filled with the same left celebs and climbers and NGO-funded left liberal experts, it's like they've recreated their own national-level media bubble, a low-rent MSNBC with the same sort of imperatives driving their output, revenue, celebrity marketing, and the constant need for fear and conflict and hero and evildoer narratives to drive eyeballs and subs." So, the problem, again, isn't actually the idea of forcing the vote itself, but that anyone from the Bernie left has gone on to garner a following and find success in the new media arena. Levine also made the mistake of singling out friend of the show David Sirota, in particular, painting him as a grifter with no real impact. Incredibly foolish choice, given that David's original reporting has already forced congressional action and actual political change. But Yasha's not the only one who's making this argument. One of the proxy fights that's unfolding through the debate over force the vote is about whether the online left and left media is something to be celebrated or to be scorned completely. Now, this feeds directly into the debate over whether left energy is best spent and how it's most effectively wielded. A debate, of course, that's been playing out ever since the collapse of the Sanders campaign. In fact, one of the persistent critiques of the force the vote concept at all is that it came from YouTube host and comedian Jimmy Dore. Plenty of people let their personal feelings about Jimmy get in the way of their analysis of his idea. But plenty also used the debate to trash the very idea that leveraging new media for political action was a worthwhile course at all. Now, personally, I find this view absurd, defeatist, and oddly detached from reality, given that online strength is essentially all that the left really has today. Today, the left does not have institutional power, so when AOC, for example, proposes that instead of online demands and floor votes, we should trust her and others to maneuver behind the scenes, it's frankly a ridiculous suggestion. Progressives have pursued this path to power and influence doggedly with little to show for it. After all, how much influence were progressives working through these institutional channels able to wield in shaping the stimulus response? How did it ultimately work out for AOC herself in trying to get on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce? Or you could ask Elizabeth Warren how playing the game has been for her vice presidential or Treasury Secretary ambitions. Playing the game as it's played here in Washington is off the table as an effective strategy. Now, Yasha argues in his piece, and others have argued this as well, that national debates in politics should be ignored completely in favor of local organizing. Now, this sounds really nice, and it's kind of a romantic concept. But of course, the truth is, today the left does not have a foothold in most local communities across the country to shape the culture and the political pipeline from the ground up. Organizations like DSA are working to change that, and their efforts backing local candidates have truly been impressive. But there's still a long way to go, and many years to go on that front. It's vital work that deserves support and attention, but it's also off the table in terms of achieving any kind of result today. Also, the ugly reality is that much of politics has been subsumed into the national political debate. There's been a lot of post-2020 debate about whether progressive candidates or blue dogs did better. I admit I've engaged in that debate myself. But really, the truth is, their policy differences matter little, if at all, at this point. Thanks to partisan tribalism, general elections have become nothing more than a temperature reading on the partisan divide within that particular region, rather than an actual contest of ideas or candidate quality. This election saw less ticket splitting than ever before, with the fewest number of districts in history splitting their vote between president and House candidates. So, for example, if you were a Democrat in a blue trending Whole Foods district, you probably did well. If you were trying to hang on as a Democrat in Cracker Barrel country, you were probably host. What's more, the problems facing the country are in fact increasingly national in scope. The pandemic is a perfect example here. Local officials have had their hands tied and their capability to respond gutted by a failed federal response. But mass structural inequality, addiction, an ever-expanding police state, and so much more are all issues that have their roots in federal government. Now, there are only two advantages that the left actually has today. One is that the left's economic positions on everything from healthcare, stimulus, wages, and unions are extremely popular. And two, the left has a loud base online and a growing new media ecosystem. So ideas like Force the Vote, that combine online pressure with exposing that yawning gap between every establishment figure in Washington and what people actually want, those are exactly the sorts of opportunities that we should be pushing for and should be exploiting. But even beyond this specific idea, the one area where the left is actually in decent shape is online. So why in the world would you unilaterally disarm in that area? Think about it. The bedrock of Sanders' campaign was online, which is exactly the reason that the establishment and their media allies went to such great lengths to turn this strength into a weakness with their whole concocted narrative about toxic Bernie bros. Similarly, AOC and the squad's power doesn't come from the offices that they hold or the committees that they sit on. It comes from the social media armies that they direct. If they aren't interested in leveraging those tools, then they're just ordinary members of Congress who don't actually deserve any more attention than anyone else. The outright dismissal, too, of media as a political force is really weird. Fox News was explicitly started as a tool for supporting right-wing politics, and by the way, it's been extraordinarily effective. MSNBC basically determined the Democratic nominee this cycle and sets the agenda for the entire Democratic Party. I think it rather overstates things to imagine that the left has recreated anything like these media powerhouses, but to dismiss the entire project of building a left media ecosystem is incredibly counterproductive. Sure, some actors in the space are better than others, but I'm old enough to remember when there was a lot of panic and hand-wringing about how the right was too dominant online and the kids were doomed to be reactionaries as a result. But the instinct to dismiss the few areas where there are some positive indications from the squad seats that have been won, the online grassroots base, the growth of left media, all of that does have one advantage. It allows some to continue to engage in a comfortable nihilism, the domain of the left for years, where nothing matters and nothing is ever possible. Irrelevance and impotence are actually easy and safe. And as this debate is exposed, many are happy to live in this neverland indefinitely. And we'll have more rising for you after this.